Hi, Chris.
Hi, Conn. How are you?
I'm doing well. How long you went for in town in D.C. for?
I'm here until tomorrow evening.
Oh. And just seeing friends or business, or what's your agenda here?
Mostly business, but I, like anyone else in politics full time, I have a decent amount of friends in D.C. So
right. Matt Stoller, your fellow MyDD blogger, he's down here. He's based out of D.C., right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got him, and where's Jonathan Singer out of?
He's out of Oregon, actually.
Oh, that's right.
So
that's right.
He's quite a bit of ways, but Jerome Armstrong, I believe, lives in Northern Virginia.
Right. So if we could, let's start off by introducing our readers to what MyDD is, and then we'll get into more of your background.
Sure.
I would call MyDD the most sharply focused, best trafficked netroots blog out there. There are other websites, Daily Kos, HOs that have more traffic, but none of them are as tightly focused on politics and offering the kind of breadth of coverage and in-depth analysis that you guys do. Maybe you could talk for a second if you agree with that, or how would you characterize where MyDD fits in to the netroots universe?
I'm certainly not going to disagree with such flattering words, but MyDD is definitely different from other blogs in that we tend to be very serious, very focused on elections, on the nuts and bolts of political infrastructure, how campaigns are run, major legislative fights that are taking place in Congress or around the states, such as net neutrality. And I think the way that I would characterize us as different from other blogs is that we tend to blog. We're trying to target a niche audience of political professionals and of highly engaged political activists.
And so, being someone who can look at your traffic data, etc., do you have any indication as to who your readers really are?
We have general demographic data, but it's hard for me to know exactly which professions they occupy the most. We know that they tend to be clumped in their 50s and in their 20s. They tend to have high incomes, extremely high education, like 80% with
advanced degrees.
Yeah, advanced degrees, and but I don't know exactly how many of them work full time in politics. But it always surprises me whenever I engage in a sort of major blogging campaign how many. Like, for example, I recently did something called the inflated Clinton poll theory, and I was stunned when I started sending the theory around to some pollsters that they'd already all heard of it.
Right.
Before I ever before I ever personally contacted them. So, yeah, it was. I think we have a very highly engaged professional audience. Perhaps not unlike that of National Journal. Perhaps the National Journal of the blogs is what I've heard.
Well, yeah, we here at the Hotline, we of course cater ourselves to professional political operatives. So, that's who pays our subscription fee. So, one would hope they'd be reading us. They pay enough to do it. But you do have, people, like, Mark Blumenthal at Pollster.com, who was, been blogging for a while there, was a Mill Street pollster. But he, of course, was a big name Dem pollster way beforehand. He is of the type that is reading MyDD. But you guys, of course, then also, have people that are a much wider audience that is then becoming active in ways that the Mark Blumenthals of the world aren't. They're calling congressional offices. They're contributing to Acts Blue and the rest of it, and do you have a sense of who those people are?
Well, I guess maybe the best way to describe them, they're people who have probably been news junkies, political activists for a long time before they ever encountered MyDD.
Right.
And they just found MyDD as a particularly nice fit for them. It's a niche market that covers the topics in depth that they like, that they can't necessarily find anywhere else. I think that there is a tendency, at least I would like to hope there's a tendency among the readers to become more active when they read MyDD, such as running for maybe Democratic Party office or perhaps upping their donations.
Well, I would say it's kind of like itching a poison oak itch, rash. Once you kind of scratch it, it keeps spreading. It becomes more of a part of who they are and more how they consider themselves and more what they do. So I think MyDD is a good outlet for those type of people who come to the web, want to get active, are interested in it, and then once they kind of, wet their whistle a little bit, they find that they really like it and start coming back.
Yeah, I think you also have to have a certain kind of temperament, though, where you're a certain analytical, maybe somewhat geeky type to particularly enjoy MyDD for that purposes, as opposed to places that might have a more humor-based or general topic mode of discussion.
So you're openly appealing to the dork crowd then, huh?
Openly, yes.
Okay.
Political dorks, come on in.
Okay, so speaking of political dorks, let's transfer to you personally. And where were you before you started blogging at MyDD, and what was that transition like? And what is the life of professional blogger Chris Browers like today?
Well, for most of my adult life before I became a professional blogger, I was actually a graduate student in English at Temple University, and where I completed everything except for my dissertation. I have a master's from there, and I'm ABD, and in a way, I think that's one of the things that's helped me adjust to a life as a professional blogger, because like then as now, I spend a lot of my time at home in my apartment by myself researching things to write about. So
it's just a slightly different topic area.
Absolutely, but I mean, the more direct transition came in about 2002 when at Temple University we successfully formed a graduate student union, and other events taking place in the country in the previous years. The Bush-Gore election recount fiasco. In 2000, and then the extremely reactionary, charged environment in this country following 2000, following the attacks of September 11th.
Right.
And just the combination of all those events, I started looking forward much more to doing union work at Temple and volunteering than I did to my more
So
academic
originally
work.
you started out looking for like a offline organizer type transition for you professionally.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, and so I was actually a union organizer for the American Federation of Teachers for a couple of years before I moved full time into blogging. And in my free hours during those 2 years, I was spending a huge amount of time on blogs like MyDD and Daily Kos.
And where did you start? You started at Daily Kos and moved over to MyDD, or
I started at Daily Kos and MyDD on the same day.
Okay.
I found them in the same Google search in late August of 2002, actually, when I was looking for more information on the 2002 midterm elections. Because I was extremely unsatisfied with the amount of information.
Do you remember what your search terms were to get up Daily Kos and MyDD at the same time?
It was probably something like 2002 midterm election polls result. I don't know, but I don't remember exactly what it was, but I wish I did. That's actually a really good question.
Well, I try to ask non-crappy questions.
Yeah. well done. I don't remember exactly what the search term was, but I found them on the same search, and it was exactly what I was looking for: political junkies with a progressive slant, talking about elections in detail, far beyond what you would find at a place like CNN or MSNBC or really any established news source.
So from there, you're a diarist at Daily Kos, commenter at MyDD, but you then rise through the ranks to what's your official title / role at MyDD?
Managing editor of MyDD.
Okay, so what's that path like?
Well, it's a long, slow climb. I think like a number of if you can call bloggers famous, like a number of famous, prominent bloggers.
Notorious, really.
Yes, infamous perhaps. You started out as a commenter on Daily Kos, specifically as a popular diarist on Daily Kos. I was perhaps one of the very first incarnations of popular diarists, even though there had been front page writers before me who had been promoted from the comments, like Bill Munn or Steve Gillard. I did some cool. I actually had the first diary ever promoted to the front page on Daily Kos when he moved to Scoop, and I invented the tip jar and things like that.
Gotcha.
And I sort of built a following. I was blogging every day, and then eventually, the obsession never stopped. I started there in August of 2002, and then by the time it was April 2004, I already had a decent reputation online as someone who wrote.
I'm telling you, you got addicted.
Yeah, I got addicted, and then Jerome put out a call in mid-April of 2004 for someone who wanted to blog full-time on MyDD. I applied for it. He gave it to me, and a few weeks later, my contract with the AFT ran out, and I just have been blogging full-time ever since.
Smooth transition then.
Yep.
Gotcha. Now, you consider yourself a professional, full-time blogger.
Yes.
Where do you think you fit in then in the universe of political professionals here in D.C.? We were just talking about Mark Blumenthal, and you had some of your fellow MyDDers beating up on Doug Schoen today. You have the Dan Gersteins of the world. Where do you fit in? Within this universe of pollsters, direct mail people, just generally the Dem consultant DC world. What is the role/place of the professional blogger activist within it?
It's similar, I would say, to many political consultants who are freelancers and who will bounce from contract to contract and job to job. Mm-hmm. About half of my income over the last 3 years has come from consulting on Netroots and blogosphere-based activities.
Now, when you say that, you mean campaigns specifically?
Mostly it's been advocacy organizations,
actually. Okay.
Like I did some work for SEIU, for example.
Oh, okay.
I did work for Brad Miller. Brad Miller's
which was a campaign, right?
2006. Yeah, that was an example. That was a campaign, but mostly it's for advocacy organizations.
Now, there are some people in town, in the media, etc., who have a problem, or at least think there's a problem, between bloggers being journalist types and yet they also being consultants for campaigns, etc. And I wonder if you could talk on your worries or non-worries on that area.
Well, for starters, the only reason I do any consulting at all is because I can't make enough living just off of the blog. The consulting is just simply to get by, and so that I can have enough time and enough money in order to become a blogger. I think.
So I think we should make that point right there. Yeah. Is that as fun and as exciting as it is, there aren't a lot of millionaire bloggers out there right now.
No. I mean, MyDD is, I believe, last I looked, it had like the 7th or 8th most traffic on like the Liberal Blog Advertising Network.
Right. I have them at 7 myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and but if I were to just live off MyDD, just off the ads, I would be back in graduate school when it came to income, and I definitely don't want to live like that anymore. Reader donations are something that Matt and I are starting to explore a lot more, and that's actually significantly eased any consulting burden. I actually haven't had a direct consulting job in a number of months now, so I'm getting closer to being a full-time blogger, but it's based more off reader support than it is off advertising.
So you say you want to kind of get away from it, and you only do because you have to. Is that because you do feel that there's some conflict of interest there, or it's just not your main goal in life, and that's why you want to get away from it? What is the motivation to get away from the consulting?
Definitely the latter. I just want to be a full-time blogger. It's something I'm far more passionate about than consulting. I mean, when I was younger, I thought there was a romance to political campaigns about, you're the underdog, you're coming from behind, you're coming up with a brilliant strategic move to pull things off right at the end. But the more I got into it, it felt more like just like some sort of vicious office job. And
when you only get paid every other year,
I've got a lot more freedom.
That's good.
Yeah.
So, as far as I'm sure you've seen criticisms of
yes.
Conflicts of interest as far as consulting on consulting campaigns, specifically White House 08 or White House 4 Do you think that's all a problem for the Netroots community for blogospheres, or do you think there's enough openness about who's getting consulting contracts and who's not among bloggers, or do you care about the issue at all?
Let me say two things about that. First, I think that as long as bloggers are open and have transparency about who they're consulting for, and if they can restrain themselves from blogging about that campaign or that candidate or that elected official or whoever they're consulting for, that's generally good. I mean, you just have the transparency and try to avoid the conflict of interest.
Right.
Secondly, the general criticism of bloggers making any money at all as consultants seems really crazy to me, considering the amounts of money that are at stake. I remember that New York Times...
Considering what the actual economy of Washington, D.C. is.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a $2 billion a year industry in just I believe, media consulting alone. Or not a year, but per but per election cycle.
Well, perhaps they just don't want to share with you, Chris.
Yeah. And, they had that New York Times article about how much bloggers were making as consultants, and I don't even think it totaled $1 million.
No, not even close.
So, I mean,
it
was a pittance. But let me say one final thing about that, is that it's not up to established news media to hold bloggers accountable for that. It's up to the readers of blogs to hold the bloggers accountable for that, because you will suffer blog death if people feel what you're writing isn't authentic, and if your voice can't be trusted, and if you're just a paid shill.
Well, I always thought it was kind of silly, along those lines, because, if you're a blogger and you're, going to consult for, whether it's Mark Warner or, Chris Dodd or whoever, it's not like you're consulting for, Lieberman or Kane or something. These are people you already agree with on 90% of the issues. What is the big deal if you're also going to do some, devote more of your attention to them than you would if you were not getting the contract.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, and it's also extremely frustrating in another way, in that there's a general tendency where people, both within the establishment and to a certain extent within the grassroots, feel that the blogosphere is something that that should exist for free.
Right.
That despite all of the major impacts, which we can get into later on, that it has had to help progressives and Democrats over the last few years, that it's not something that needs sustainable funding or any resources to get by. And it's terribly frustrating. It's very much taking a new movement for granted, and it's not giving some of your most effective.
I think generally when everyone looks at politics and campaigning, they all want to think that it's pure as the driven snow. That's why campaign finance reform is so popular, etc. But at the end of the day, money makes the world go round, even politics, and even progressive politics.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, and there's nothing wrong with being able to make a living and on more than ramen noodles.
I'm all for making a living.
Yeah.
So you were just recently talking about success in the nest roots. I was wondering if you could kind of go over some big MyDD successes, hits from the 06 cycle,
sure.
and then look at 08 ahead. Look at what your projects are going to be.
We had several major projects in 2006, and this is actually something that I think somewhat separates us from other blogs. Maybe there are some exceptions, such as Talking Points Memo and Fire Dog Lake, but we engage in numerous major campaigns that we blog about over a long period of time.
Such as?
One of those campaigns was a project called Use It or Lose It,
mm-hmm.
where we were working to call ultra-safe members of the Democratic House caucus who either had no Republican challenger or who had a Republican challenger who raised only $5,000 or less during the entire cycle.
Right, people who were essentially safe.
And the idea was to have those members of Congress shift their money to expand the playing field in 2006, when this was in October of 2006, when up to 60 or 70 Republican-held seats were in play, but a lot of those challenges were held back because the Democrats in question did not have a lot of money. So we wanted to shift that money out of safe districts and into some of the more second-tier or third-tier long-shot districts.
And you guys did the bulk of the work and the analysis going into
yes.
figuring out which of these guys had the safe races, and thanks to FEC reports, you could also say how much they had in the bank.
How much they had in the bank, who to contact about it, every last detail, and we were able to
correct me if I'm wrong, this transfer through Use It or Lose It actually funneled more money to challenger campaigns than online donations through ActBlue and some other projects.
Yeah, we managed to transfer $3 million from these safe seats into more competitive districts through Use It or Lose It, whereas our ActBlue page, which we did in concert with Daily Kos and Swing State Project, raised about $1.6 million, which is still a huge amount of money.
Which is what I thought was so great about the campaign, because everyone, especially in this town, wants to look at the net roots as, oh my God, it's an ATM machine, we can just go to them and get more money.
Yeah.
But in 2006, the biggest success money-wise was, making Democrats basically be team players. Say, look, Markey up in Massachusetts, Kerry's not retiring, you need to start sharing that dough, and on down the line through there.
Oh, it was perfect timing, because you had so many activists who probably just felt frustrated,
right.
About considering how much money they gave, and you had what seemed to be deadbeat Democrats who weren't necessarily paying their share.
Especially the 08ers who would send out these emails saying, "Oh, help this X candidate out right now," and you're like, especially as a blogger yourself, it's like I can't, here I'm, funneling over $50, and X House members sitting on a $2 million gold pile there. So
yeah, we had another campaign called AdWatch that was based off of a poll that we conducted. With Wright Consulting and the Courage campaign. It was a post-election poll of the California 50th special election in June, and what we wanted to do was conduct a detailed poll of voters in the district to try and figure out why Francine Busby lost. There were so many theories as to why she had lost, such as her supposed gaffe about immigration, or that it was simply too conservative a district, or
which got helped spread by conservative blogs. The video there,
absolutely, and. There were a lot of theories as to why she lost, but without any exit polls, it was very difficult to understand why she lost. And Busby's loss was very worrying for Democrats at the time because this was supposed to be a big wave year for us, and even though that was a pretty red district, it wasn't so red that Busby should have lost.
Well, that was like a March primary. It was June, right? It was June.
Yeah, well, it was a June 6th primary.
It was June, right?
We conducted the poll a few weeks after that, and then. In August, after a lot of analysis, we produced a candidate memo, arguing, basically, in a nutshell, run on Iraq, but specifically stand up to Republicans, blame Republicans for Iraq, and be somewhat more confrontational.
Like, and just a very small, Busby lost to who?
What's his name? Brian Bilbray.
And it was Cunningham's old seat?
Yes,
right.
California.
So it was a special election because of Cunningham, and she lost to Brian Bilbray.
Yeah, and so we argued against running on things like the culture of corruption, or even running on a specific Iraq plan. The idea was you were supposed to run accountability in Iraq, that you will stop the direction in Iraq, that you will stop George Bush.
Right, and there was a lot of talk in this town, and even on other blogs, especially Talking Points Memo, about how big the culture of corruption was going to be. And you guys were big out there saying, look, the GOP sucks on corruption, but that's not gonna win for us. We need to go all Iraq.
Yeah, our data showed that voters, even though they thought that maybe Republicans were a little bit more corrupt, it was just a little bit more corrupt. There's this general cynicism about politics nationwide that I think a lot of people just assume members of both parties are corrupt, no matter who might have the scandals of the moment. And so we wanted to urge candidates to run differently, so we conducted this program called AdWatch that followed up on the candidate memo, where we would critique the ads of basically every single Democratic candidate for Congress in the entire country based on the criteria we set down in our polling memo. And it's difficult to sort of quantify the success we had in that.
Did you get any feedback from political consultants and or campaigns?
Yeah.
Can you share one or two stories about that?
Let's see here. Matt was telling me about some media consultant he was talking with in early October, and it was on an unrelated subject. And he's like, "Oh, you're a media consultant. I run this thing called AdWatch," and the consultant just said, "I've heard of AdWatch," and the conversation just ended right there.
It.
Yeah,
Matt had already lost a friend.
Yeah, exactly. So it's much more anecdotal. I don't know exactly what kind of specific impact we had, but I do feel that was perhaps the final step in a longer campaign that we've been conducting, just to try to get Democrats to run on Iraq. And one of the main ways that culminated was in the August 2006 Connecticut Senate primary against Joe Lieberman.
Right. I think I voiced over, I cut off an important point, which was that you guys were saying run on Iraq, but not offer specific plan, and that you guys specifically advised, don't say, X deadlines or partition or whatever else each candidate comes up with, but just Iraq's going bad.
Don't do that, because voters don't believe you can implement it. They're not stupid. You're not running for president. You're running for a congressperson for the Kentucky 3rd District or something like that. You're not going to be the new Secretary of Defense. Run on what Congress can do, and what Congress can do is it can hold investigations, and it can at least threaten to stop Bush's direction in Iraq. It can't give specific details.
Although it could cut off funds.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, we're going to see where that goes over the next couple of days.
Right. You want to talk a little bit? You mentioned Act Blue earlier, but
Sure.
I don't think our audience knows what that is.
Act Blue is a web page that allows any person in the country to raise money for whatever Democratic federal candidates they want, and also for many Democratic committees and for a few statewide and local candidates.
So walk me through that process. I'm a blogger in Texas, and I want to help a local congressman outside of Houston. I want to help unseat Tom DeLay in 2006. What do I do?
Well, one thing I would do is set up an Act Blue page, where you would raise money for whoever is challenging Tom DeLay in that seat. And if there's a contested primary, they'll have an option where you can raise money for Texas 22 General Election Fund that will go to whoever wins that seat. And then hopefully you can urge readers of your blog or your email list to start giving money through Act Blue, and it allows you to monitor exactly how many donations you've given or that you've personally helped generate. And one of the reasons Act Blue is important for bloggers like me is that in 2004 we raised a lot of money for candidates, but we were never sure exactly how much we were raising.
Right.
It was very difficult for us to quantify our impact. But in the 2005 to 2006 cycle, Act Blue was able to raise $17 million for Democratic House and Senate candidates around the country, and our webpage raised about 8% of that.
And what it also allows you to do is it allows an infrastructure to be in place so that any blogger throughout the country doesn't have to reinvent the wheel as far as online donations, FEC filings, etc.
Yeah.
And you guys even allow, it's state by state, but you guys have made an effort to then go through and apply to each state laws. I don't know how many states you guys have on, but I noticed you guys kept adding on throughout the cycle, so that then they can also give to state races, which are also very important.
Yeah, Act Blue is trying to make it legally possible for them to raise money for statewide for state legislature and local candidates in every single state. But that takes a lot of time because there's 50 different local election laws to have a consolidated website.
Right.
To do that, but it has a tremendous amount of functionality where you can connect to the candidate websites, you can find other people who are raising money for it, it takes you to events, you can hook up local blogs that are writing about that race. So it's a very important piece of self-starting progressive infrastructure that has been particularly useful for bloggers, but has also been utilized by some major PACs, such as Barbara Boxer, who had a page that raised an Act Blue page that raised $1 million.
And Edwards' campaign for a while was using that as their fundraising tool.
Yeah, I think they've raised like $3 million, $4
Right.
million. Yeah, it's around that number. Yeah.
Now, there's a more controversial campaign that you ran,
Yes.
the Google Bomb campaign. I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through that, and then also walk us through the pushback you received.
Okay. The Google Bomb campaign was it was one of my more, definitely a more controversial idea that just arose out of a simple question myself, is like, what form of direct activism can you have online that doesn't require people doing anything offline whatsoever, or doesn't require doing any money?
Right.
And so the idea I came up with was to dominate search engine rankings in a negative way for basically all Republican candidates around the country.
So you're going to have to go briefly explain how the Google ranking
Sure.
system works.
Google, obviously being the largest search engine in the country, or at least I believe it's the largest search
in the world.
Yeah,
In the
by
galaxy.
a long way. Ranks according, like, if you're searching for apples, the first 5 searches will be whichever 5 websites have the most embedded hyperlinks pointed to them that say apples. And that's sort of a mouthful, but if the viewers know what an embedded hyperlink is when you can click on a link that says Apple, that's an embedded hyperlink. And whatever website you go to on Apple, that counts as one, incoming link in the Google ranking. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but the basic idea is we were going to, I wanted to find the most negative article written about a Republican candidate in about 70 or 80 key House and Senate races around the country.
Right.
It was always, there were a few criteria. Like I wanted the article to be written by a local news source that people trusted.
Right, you wanted it to be MSM, and you wanted it to be as local as possible. It didn't always work out that way, but that was the goal.
No, it didn't. I mean, there were some races where we just couldn't find something good enough. But there were some races where it worked out really well. And so once we had the article we're looking for, that it was by a trusted news source, it wasn't an opinion piece, it was straight journalism, and it was negative. Like it painted the Republican candidate in a negative light. We found this all out through a series of volunteers on over just a couple of days.
Right, you're just asking your readers for help. Can
Yep.
you all look at this race? Everyone help. So it's not just Chris Bowers researching at his desk.
There's no way I could have done all that work by myself. I mean, it was the amount of data you're sifting through is tremendous. But yeah, I mean, we actually just did it in 2 days with about 7 or 8 dozen volunteers, put it together on a Google spreadsheet. And so then we had our list of articles, and from that point, I have a lot of friends in the blogosphere, and I just sent them, now whenever you write about this candidate, make sure you link to this post. And
right, and then you advertise it at MyDD, saying everyone, get on board if you have a blog or a website, embed these hyperlinks into every post on it, and so we can move the rankings. And you saw lots of movement on the rankings. You would have updates.
Yeah.
Was it weekly, daily, or it seemed like,
We were updating it daily, and I believe by the end of the 52 races that we found appropriate articles for, 47 or 48 of them were in the top 8.
So in other words, if I typed in, God, I'm racking on mine for a race here.
Mike Sodrell or something
there you
like
go.
that. Yeah.
Your story, the one that you guys had picked out, would pop up within the top 5 of Google's rankings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the reason this is so important is because the number one use people make of the internet in terms of politics, and by people I just mean all Americans,
right,
is to find more information about candidates. And so this is actually a way to push that information into the most common the most common political activity people take online. And I actually ran some Google AdWords alongside of our Google Bomb campaigns within the specific districts.
Okay, now you're going to have to quickly explain what Google AdWords are.
Okay, sure. A Google AdWord is when you type in something on Google and there's you have a paid advertisement
on the right-hand column.
On the right-hand column that will appear for a given search in a certain area. And so I wanted to measure how effective the Google bombs were, and by the end, it seemed clear to me that we had reached about 700,000 or 800,000 people through this campaign, all within their specific districts, and just for those 50 races, which comes out to a surprisingly large percentage of the electorate. Like we actually managed to get about 3 or 4% of the electorate to read the article we wanted them to read. And
it's such a better reach than a TV point, because it's people going out thinking they found it on their own,
exactly,
as opposed to being bombarded with it on a source like the television, which they're already highly skeptical of.
Yeah, and so that was my ingenious plan. What I didn't expect was how much coverage it would get. And I mean, it got covered around the right-wing blogs, which of course led to the inevitable series of.
Well, Marcos called me an idiot because of my coverage of it.
I don't even. There was so much of it going on back then, Conn. I don't remember what any specific person said, except that I remember something about Michelle Malkin. I think said that Google should sue me, which just seemed like a really sad response. I don't know. It's like that's the best you can do.
Well, Google's CEO was out here at a personal democracy conference, and someone had asked him about Google bombing, and he said that they were taking measures within their programming to counteract such campaigns.
But the thing is that what I'm doing is actually not affected by the way they change their rankings. Yeah, because what I'm doing is not technically a Google bomb. So
their word for Google bomb is different than yours.
There is a slight difference. A Google bomb is when you would type in, say, something seemingly unrelated to a topic, and then that topic will come up. Like if you type in miserable failure, and your first search is George Bush, or if you type in waffles and your first search result
So
is John
a lot
Kerry.
of the candidates, I guess that's AdWords, but I know a lot of the candidates, like when you type in Barack Obama, you'll get Hillary Clinton stuff as well. But that's AdWords, so that's not Google bombing, etc.
That's actually a very bad. I mean, if it's true when you type in Barack Obama and you're getting Hillary Clinton stuff in the top 20 of their search engines, that's not good by the Barack Obama web team. I mean, this is really a cheap tactic, and it's very easy to pull off, even if you have only 70 or 80 supporters with a blog of their own. So that's not good.
So you're saying the AdWords isn't they're wasting their money there, or what?
Oh
what's your point there?
no. You were talking about AdWords.
I was talking about AdWords.
Okay, I thought you meant search engine ranking.
No.
My bad. I'm sorry.
What specifically? I mean, was it just the coverage was bad, or were you getting lots of bad emails or comments about it on MyDD, or what exactly? What exactly was the pushback you felt? Just negative coverage, or what exactly?
I got a lot of the bad emails that always happens whenever the right-wing blogosphere starts
So
you and everything. But that's sort of to be expected. I mean, it was pretty bad. I mean, I don't know if they were exactly death threats. I mean, there's sort of debates over whether those things are death threats or not, or they're just unhinged people ranting.
Right.
But the coverage definitely took a surprisingly strong turn for the worst almost immediately after the first New York Times article on it, where I think I was offered interviews by every single nightly news. There was something like 40 or 50 Google News results on it within the first day, and it gave me the sense that it was trying to be covered as a dirty trick.
Right.
Whereas I just thought it was a cool campaign that anyone could do basically for free.
And the last thing you wanted to do was create a dirty trick Dem story going into the cycle here.
Exactly. So I pulled the plug on that, which it's too bad. I'll probably never be on the nightly news again. But
but that's not really your goal now, is it, Chris?
No, it's not. But it would be good advertisement for the blog.
Probably. So moving on to our next topic, you've written in the past about how blog traffic is leveling out.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you see that as a possible problem on the horizon for Netroots and their future influence within the Democratic Party.
Well, I'll do the first part first.
Yeah, first describe the phenomenon that you're seeing.
But I've spent a substantial amount of time studying traffic levels and traffic patterns within the political blogosphere, and that includes both the progressive blogosphere and the conservative blogosphere,
right.
Because I feel it's important to compare the two. And one thing I found since I started doing this in 2003 is that traffic was basically on an S curve. It just kept going up and up and up, almost straight up, from about 300,000 people reading it a day in the summer of 2003 to about 10 times that reading it a day 2 years later, or maybe even 20 times that, depending upon the strength of the news cycle at the time. Like the Katrina coverage, which obviously bolted up news coverage around the country, is also going to create more readers for political blogs. And when it's a dead news cycle for established news sources, it's a dead news cycle for us too. But the S-curve flattened out and stopped sometime in October or November of 2005. And the reason for that, I think, is that basically the political blogosphere had reached a market saturation point, where the type of person who reads a political blog, which is invariably going to be a news junkie, a political activist, a political professional, an election obsessive, anything like that, we sort of reached all of the people who were dedicated to the internet enough, or who had the high enough level of digital literacy that they were going to find blogs.
Yeah, I think market saturation is just the right term.
Yeah, and so by late 2005, we had just basically all of those people were reading political blogs, and it just wasn't going to get any bigger. As far as whether or not that's dangerous for Netroots' influence within the Democratic Party or the broader progressive movement, I think what it means more is that we have to stop, and I think since then we have stopped, just relying on constant growth, and you have to start thinking more about building more effective infrastructure and finding ways to make new coalitions and new alliances.
What are some of those new coalitions?
Well, I certainly think that you see something with, say, Barack Obama's candidacy, where he has both tremendous netroot support and tremendous African American support, or a coalition with Labor.
I got one of Matt Stoller's favorite hobby horses.
Yeah, and there actually are a surprising number of bloggers, such as myself, who have a background in labor. So I think that there's some connection there as well. Even though it seems like none of our readers are ever in it, but it's like it's amazing how many of us like started in the labor movement in some way. But we need to find
any theories as to why very few of your readers are actually members of labor unions?
Well, it's probably because 50% of them have advanced degrees and they make over $100,000 a year, which tend to not be in jobs that are unionized.
Is there ever going to be a bloggers union?
I don't know who we'd organize against.
But you could have meetings and rules and dues. It'd be fun.
Exactly. Gross Point blogger. Yeah.
Okay, finally, I know you want to talk about some White House away polling. I know you had mentioned your inflated Clinton poll theory at the top of the segment. I know you're kind of moving on from that, so we can just touch on it briefly, but I know you also want to talk more about how news organizations use polls to create media narratives that kind of define campaigns. So let's kick it off with the inflated Clinton poll theory you talked about.
Oh, sure. The inflated Clinton poll theory was in many ways coming full circle for me. I actually made my first splash as a blogger nationally for arguing that Gallup's polls were skewed towards Bush back in 2004. Mm-hmm. And this was a case where I was trying to argue that most national polls were showing a larger Clinton advantage over Obama than actually existed. Mainly because they were sampling about 45 to 50% of the voting age population, whereas only about 10 to 15% of the voting age population actually makes up partisan primary elections.
So they just weren't getting the right segment, and they weren't putting any effort to get the right segment.
And I saw information that showed that people who were paying more attention to the race were much more favorable towards Obama, and it made me think that Clinton's voters tended to be just somewhat low information voters who I mean, not that all her voters were like that, but just that they were disproportionately within that sample basically
it was enough. There's a sizable portion enough to affect 5 percentage points, whatever.
The argument was that Obama was doing better among much more likely participants in the Democratic primary and caucus electorate, and Clinton's voters were coming more disproportionately just from self-identified Democrats who were registered to vote, but who weren't likely to participate in primary or caucus elections.
And how do you feel about that theory today?
Oh boy, I had a long argument with a number of different pollsters and just researchers, and I think in the end I was wrong.
You're such a big man, Chris.
Yeah, but, that's something that's maybe different. At least I would like to think is different from me and, I don't know, someone like Sean Hannity who will make outrageous comments, but at least I will abide by research, and admit when I'm wrong. But it was worth exploring.
So what was the wrong part? I mean, I just remember Mystery Pollster's post on it. And
yeah, it turned out to be wrong for a number of reasons. Is that I was right that Obama was doing better among people who were paying more attention to the election. However, Clinton was doing better among other groups that were more likely to vote, such as she's doing better among people who self-identify as Democrat rather than people who are independents who lean towards Democrats. And obviously the self-identified Democrats are more likely to vote in a Democratic
So there were just other smaller segments that make up Democratic Party voters that you had not filtered into your theory, acquired, thought about when you formulated it.
Basically, it all canceled out. I mean, the early evidence I saw, for example, in an Iowa poll that showed Clinton up by 3 points on Edwards among all self-identified Dems, but down 7 points among likely caucus goers. Like things like that were sort of setting me off, saying that maybe there's more to that nationwide, but it doesn't seem like there was. But that's another danger, that for every Google bomb campaign and use it or lose it in Connecticut Senate primary, there's going to be some campaign like this that you start and you cause a big stir. And
the important thing is no one got hurt.
Exactly.
So, do you have a larger critique of national polling here?
Well, certainly. I mean, maybe they're not skewing the numbers in this case, but they might be, and like they're certainly not being open about what national polls in 2008 are sampling. Like they're saying that there's clear implications that 2008 primary polls are sampling the primary and caucus electorate for Democrats and Republicans, but it's just not true. That they're much larger universe samples, and it's. Is
it a matter of lack of resources, or do you think they have an agenda?
I think basically it's laziness and a lack of resources that comes from not providing it. There's a habit to use polls as a means to sell newspapers or to get ratings, rather than as a means to accurately survey public opinion within the news media.
It's an easy but expensive news story.
Exactly.
So does this mean you want to see less polling?
Yeah,
more
I would
polling,
actually
or
like to see
less
less
polling. So you'd like to see less
that's
resources
not
devoted. So you'd like to see same amount of resources, less polling, but better polling.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would like to see. Something more like Pew, but
or the Diageo hotline polls.
Or exactly, yes. You guys do a pretty good job too. Although that open-ended presidential question is both interesting and strange.
Well, it's different.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but that's actually above my pay grade. I don't. I just try to promote it. I don't actually help produce it.
Well, I mean, I always publish lots of stuff on the Diageo hotline polls because the open-ended question does make it a very interesting read, at least.
And so, quick for our readers, or for last thought here, what is the interesting part of it for the opening question?
Of the poll?
Right.
Oh, well, when you're not prompting people, you see support for basically all Republican candidates drop off, and you also see support for Al Gore crash. Like I believe in your last poll, 3% of people said they wanted Al Gore on their own. But when they're prompted in polls, he gets like 16 or 17%. Just things like that are particularly interesting, and then you'll see. You actually won't see that different number-wise within the Democratic field, but you'll see that the Democrats are much more excited about this election that they can name their candidate, whereas Republicans have to be prompted in order to support someone at this point.
Great. Well, do you have any last thoughts for us, Chris, or are we ready to sign off here?
I can't say I do, but I certainly read Hotline every day, and I would say that if you read Hotline every day, you will definitely like to read MyDD and the stuff that Matt Stoller, myself, and Jonathan.
Well, let me try to play gotcha with you at the last bit.
Sure.
You say you read Hotline every day.
Yeah.
How are you getting it, Chris? Because it's a
Hotline on call.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to have a free in on the other one, but
someone in our business department shut you down, huh?
Yeah, I got found
Well,
out.
then let's all hope that MyDD is very successful and has enough revenue to buy a hotline subscription on the up and up.
Okay. Hopefully.
Let's all hope for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Knock on wood.
It's been great talking to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.